Morning, this is Jim Benton with the Chorus Daily Briefing. Happy Friday, April 10th. Jerry Farr, Director of Global Sales Enablement with Redis Labs. Hey, Jerry, great to have you here today. How's your Friday? How's your Friday treating you?
Not too bad, Jim. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I know you're out in Austin. How's the community out in Austin? How are you holding up before we get into the work side of things?
Well, I wouldn't know much about the community. You've sort of been holed up at the home for a month now, but we've been really fortunate. At least our family has. The main difference is my wife has our 7-year-old son home, so she's sort of working and teaching a kid. For me, my life hasn't changed a great deal. I have worked from home already anyway, so not really different.
Gotcha. I like the way you said that. Having someone at home, and I've got 3 kids at home, and same thing. I was curious, just before we jump in, any surprises that from the whole work from home, just as our worlds have flipped, anything that kind of caught you in this period?
I think people have realized not so many meetings are necessary. You can get by by just sending an email and not having so many meetings. I do think that it's making the workplace a lot more productive, which is an interesting sort of silver lining to it all.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one observation I've had is I can go, back to back on Zoom, as we all are doing, and literally within 30 seconds of the end of the day Zoom, be at the kitchen table eating dinner, and it just feels like I've been teleported. I mean, someone invented teleportation, and boom, you're going between things in a way that you just didn't think was possible.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, cool. We'll jump into the data today. Today's topic, we're going to go deep on, specifically looking at the percentage of meetings that are first meetings, also looking at discovery meetings, and I'll open it up by just covering some of the stats that have kind of led to framing the week. So we kicked off the week looking at overall meeting volume, which was down essentially for the first time. It dropped 11%. We do have the beginning of the quarter impact, but that's different behavior than last year. Last year, we actually saw an increase in meetings in the beginning of the quarter. So we need to dig in and understand what's happening there. And secondly, we've been looking at over the last several weeks, cold call connect rates have been dropping. It was down 42% from baseline, but over the last week, it finally bounced back. We saw the cold call rates go up 14%, connects held steady at 9.6. On those 2 stats, before we jump into the new data, how are these resonating with your own team? And maybe tell us just a little bit of the scope of your team. How large of a group do you have out there?
Sure. Well, we have a global sales org of about 90 folks, including SDRs and AEs and solutions architects. And interestingly, we've been very, very fortunate as a company, in part because of kind of the space we're in and the nature of our customers, that we haven't really seen much of a dip in any of the metrics. Not meetings booked, not opportunities accepted, not pipeline production. Everything is either sort of holding steady or even going up. So, fingers crossed, we're in a very fortunate situation.
I mean, Jerry, that's been one of the observations of all these briefings, is that for the most part, especially if you go back just one, the meeting volumes have held steady. You'd think that if we're hunkered down, it would drop, and you're validating the same thing. That now, look, we've seen across segments, it's different. Infrastructure, as an example, did see a nice spike up. Collaboration saw a spike up, whereas the travel, local retail, we are down 30, 40%. So we know it's not uniform. I think on average, we've held steady, but certain sectors are holding it. Let's jump into first meetings. So this is the most updated data that our team has pulled. There's been a consistency across from baseline to even in the COVID-19 period, that roughly about 30% of meetings held by AEs are first meetings. It's dropped over the last 3 weeks a bit. It's a small drop, but we're down in 29.7 versus the 32s. Are you seeing the same blend of first meetings? It sounds like you're up, but and how have they changed? Has a first meeting any different today than it was 6 weeks ago?
Well, like I said, the sort of percents and numbers are either steady or going up for us.
Yeah.
What's changed, though, is sort of the nature of those first meetings. We traditionally have had a very sort of event-heavy go-to-market motion in the sales org. So our SDRs and reps would work together to create an event in some location and invite a bunch of people to those, and then kind of conversations would emerge from that. Obviously, that's not possible anymore, but we've transitioned into sort of Zoom-led meetings, and that has really lucky that it hasn't resulted in a drop in any of the numbers.
Interesting. So you've shifted from these live meetings to Zoom, and it hasn't dropped. I mean, do you think that's going to impact the future? How do you think about the world when it resumes?
Well, I mean, I I haven't talked to our CEO or CRO about this, but I'm thinking if we don't have to spend the money to go do an event, we get the same results. So,
Um, it is. I think a lot of us are thinking about that, and I know there is pieces that we miss, but it's interesting looking at the metrics how it's not impacting that side of it
yeah.
yet. From an enablement standpoint, any changes to the messaging and the way in which we're talking to folks?
Um, so I think the conversations have been different. And by the way, just one brief anecdote, or I guess a data point. I noticed that 13% of our calls in the last month have mentioned COVID or coronavirus in some way.
Mm,
I assumed it would be higher than that, but just 13. But definitely the notion of empathy, just people just really caring about and paying attention to the customer and genuinely caring about their situation has certainly increased. In fact, I found myself flipping through Cialdini's old book, Influence.
yeah.
It's an old standby, and just his notion of reciprocation and the importance of it when you're trying to influence someone. When you give something to someone, they sort of feel obliged to give back, and I feel like that notion has been reinforced in these times, and it's great for sales, and it's great to it's kind of encouraging sellers to do great selling practice anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting that you tracked 13% have the COVID. Is that coming from Chorus, or how are you getting that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Our overall data show that 50% of calls had it. So you're below, but as you mentioned, it's not that it's business as usual, but you're in the zone where you're able to help a lot of people right now and get in there.
Absolutely.
And it's not coming up quite as often on these calls as we're seeing, across other calls.
Yeah, definitely over than I thought it.
And one last question before we jump in the next stat. On first meetings, curious about your thoughts on first impressions. We have everybody working from home. We have people have different home environments. Some have roommates sitting next to them, and these are uncontrollables right now.
Mm-hmm.
Any advice as you look at the game film and the reviews? Are you liking what you're seeing from the home environment? Any thoughts and impressions on that?
I actually love it. I've always been a firm believer in the notion that people buy from people, and you want to have a human connection. And just having a camera on and having this conversation and seeing your kid run behind you, seeing your dog start barking at something behind you. Some people used to think that was unprofessional. Now I think it just shows you're human. We're all sort of going through this together. So I think it helps forge stronger human connections.
I think it's well said. It's quite an icebreaker. I had 1 minute before jumping on here, I had a 9-year-old come by and say, "Let me show you the Lego helicopter. I fixed the danger part." And I'm like, "Okay, give me 1 second. I'll be right back." I love it. I think that we're seeing a lot of human to human right now. Let's jump into the second data point, and that is looking at the sales process and specifically discovery calls. Big aspect of all of our lives. When we look at the data here, especially we just pulled this for the most recent week, we're still seeing the purple is 2020, 30% drop year over year, and just down. It's been down significantly in the COVID period versus what we saw last year. How have discovery, from what you're seeing, have discovery calls changed?
Well, the nature of the conversations has changed. As I mentioned, it's more, I would call it sort of authentic conversations about humans talking to humans and tell me about your life, tell me about what's going on. There's one of the things I listen for and kind of track in discovery calls is discussion of pain or challenges or something like that. And in the last 2 months, the percent of calls that have that sort of thing going on has increased 20%. Now, obviously, in any sort of initial call, you're trying to discover, so you're trying to understand where their current situation is. But just the fact that it's gone up 20% in the last couple months, tells me that that's actually probably a good thing for us.
Yeah, I was looking at our data just before jumping on. How many questions our sales team asks in our research phase, which is sort of our discovery zone. And our benchmark is 3 to 5. I was looking at the closed ones are sort of in the 5 or 6 zone of questions. But I've seen discovery that's really in the past mechanical. That it's sort of that asking questions, ask questions, and you then have this new discovery in a wartime mode, where, as you're mentioning, the empathy. Stringing that together seems so important right now, to not be the mechanical discovery of just asking to ask. as you talk to different verticals or have to get into the verticals that are being hit harder, is that where you're finding the empathy, or are you seeing any specific changes on different customer segments that your team's talking to?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously there are some segments that make more sense for us to reach out to, and some that not. In fact, that one of the sort of structural changes we've had to make is noticing that yes, we do. Each of our sales teams does have named accounts in different sort of verticals. Probably doesn't make sense for us to focus on ones that are obviously really, really struggling. And focus on ones that are going to be doing okay. Although I have been fascinated by when we do have conversations with customers or prospects who are obviously in a really tough time right now, just the nature of to your point, that the empathy, like our sellers doing a really nice job of saying, hey, I totally get it. Anything I can do to help you, and not trying to sell. Customers who are in a tough spot, we're being empathetic. For the ones who are doing okay, we're just kind of directing our energy that way.
Jerry, when you look across the industry, and our trends are showing that, discovery's been down, is even down before COVID-19. Do you think there's trends away from discovery, or are we seeing changes from what you look out in the industry? Are you seeing any behavioral changes to discovery?
I don't know if I've seen behavior change. I've seen, thought leaders and influentials suggest that it's going to be going away because buyers are going to be doing all the stuff they need to on their own without, before coming to us. And I'm not sure I buy that. I think it still is important for sellers to help buyers think differently about their business and think differently about the problems and uncover things that the buyer didn't know.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time believing it's going to go away.
I couldn't agree more. There was a comment that came in. I shared data a week and a half ago about this. And one of the comments came in from a sales professional saying, yeah, I'm doing a lot less discovery nowadays. People seem to know the product. My observation on that was that when you have a lot more inbound selling, that might be the case. You still need to do great discovery to have great close rates. But when people are knocking on your door to say, I want to buy, it can be a bit different than when you're in outbound.
Sure.
Is your model mostly inbound at Redis or Redis, or are you outbound as well?
Mostly outbound, yeah.
Mostly outbound. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, hey, Jerry, I wanted to fire up a quick poll for the group today. Mm-hmm. Let me launch this. And the question today is, are you taking as many first calls with prospective customers as you were a month ago? So just testing our data against the audience. And I'll let this come in up. Results are coming in. And let's see, I'll give it a second. Right now, yes, just as many is definitely well ahead of no. We have different priorities now. And you are matching that, Jerry, that yes, just as many, if not more. Love it. I will. So yeah, we are essentially 100% of the folks coming in are yes, just as many. I think it's just remarkable, what we're seeing out there. Jerry, any final thoughts or advice to go-to-market leaders who are navigating this with their own teams?
I would think just trust your sellers. That I think they're being encouraged and sometimes forced to do things that are good for sellers anyway. Just acting like a human and caring about the customer and asking questions that may not necessarily be about your business or your product, but just understanding where they are in their human condition. Allow sellers to do that. Second point I would make is that this is an opportunity to actually encourage more systems and process and methodologies. If you especially if you have sort of enterprise sellers who might be out in the field and spend a lot of time on planes and that kind of thing, they're not doing that these days. So when everyone's kind of inside, there is an opportunity for folks like me in enablement and operations and that kind of thing to kind of promote the things we like to say. We want consistency and predictability and that kind of thing. So it actually does, in my sense, sort of bode well for that.
Yeah, I think it's a nice little break on the planes. But Jerry, really appreciate you joining us today on Friday. I wish you good health and a great weekend, and just thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, you got it. We'll see you around.
Bye-bye.